Hi there, everybody. This is Brandon Peppler. I'll be doing a special marathon for you all. This one will mark probably one of my favorite book series and movie franchises. That's right, I'll be doing Harry Potter and all 8 films corresponding. Why is that? Well, for instance, it is the 20th anniversary of the release of the Philosopher's Stone, or Sorcerer's Stone, for those of you in the US. So I will be doing an audio commentary on the first film. Oh, and before I forget, it was also going to be Harry Potter's birthday. That's right, he's going to be 38 in book continuity. For those of you who are not aware of the time period, he was born on July 31st, 1980, so happy 38th, Harry. And hopefully you are enjoying time with your family. So in any case, this again is an audio commentary, so I won't be playing the movie on the screen for you. However, you are welcome to put on either a streamed version of the film or your own physical copy, be it DVD or Blu-ray. And just before you begin, please pause so that way you can get whatever treats you have, like any chocolate frogs, pumpkin pasties, every flavor beans, or even your special kind of butterbeer. So take the time to pause, and then we'll begin as soon as you hit play again. Everybody else set? Awesome. So as a reminder, I will be watching the extended or director's cut of The Philosopher's Stone. So this commentary will be extra long. So for those of you who have your movies at the 0 mark, you may press play at 1, 2, 3, go. And we have ourselves the Warner Brothers logo. So I would say that when I was first introduced to Harry Potter, I didn't have much of an interest in it. My grandparents used to get me the books, and right up until the first film was coming out, that was when I started reading. And after that, I got sucked in. It just seemed so wonderful just actually reading that kind of a book at that time. It really got me hooked, and since then I just wondered what the world would be like. And after seeing the first film in theaters probably at least 2 times, I still couldn't get enough of it. So, upon reading the books, I was just... Oh, and there is the late, great Richard Harris himself. I mean, I would think that he is kind of like the Alec Guinness of our generation, given that most of us knew, of course, Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi in the original Star Wars trilogy. And, of course, with Richard Harris, I was never really familiar with any of his work until having researched him. And, turned out that I was hearing up on Weird Al Yankovic's Jurassic Park, and the original version, MacArthur Park, was actually done up by Richard Harris himself, and that took me by surprise. He actually is a very good vocalist when it comes to singing. And it kind of matched up with how he sounded even at his old age. So, back to the books. Back when I was a kid, I had only read through books 1 through 4, and it wasn't because I stopped reading. It just became to where life got so hectic, and I just haven't picked up either of the books for a long, long time. Just upon reading them, it's very strange how fantasy and reality just blend so well in the Harry Potter world. Sorry, Wizarding world. So, ever since being exposed, I was so enthralled with the aspect of magic in the real world that even I wanted to be a wizard so bad. Like, sometimes I collected bottles because I wanted to dive into the idea of potion making, because in real life I have a fascination with herbal remedies. Yes, I said herbal instead of herbal, because there's an H in it. It is our reference, folks. And that's another thing that I kind of picked up over the years. It's like using like some of the English pronouncing of words and some terminologies. I guess it just comes to where like people appreciate, or would seem to appreciate, perhaps more intellectual people, but I don't know. It just, when it comes to people like that, they just seem very strange. So it's sometimes better just to blend in. Try not to show too much of yourself. When I got into the continuity of the Harry Potter story, I didn't quite register it took place during the 90s. I just happened to bump into it while looking up the Harry Potter wiki. I can still remember when the old site came up. I mean, back then it had of course, some of the old Flash games. I mean, like you could play Quidditch. And there was even a sorting event that you could do. And from what I remembered, I was sorted into Gryffindor on the movie site, right before Pottermore came in. Around Pottermore's earlier time, I then got sorted into Ravenclaw, which has been my house ever since, and I feel very proud of it in many ways, but sometimes I feel borderline because I tried to get in on a different email for the sorting, and I ended up getting Hufflepuff. In essence, I kind of seem borderline through the three different houses: Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, and Ravenclaw. I don't see myself as a Slytherin type, though. When I first saw this film, I noticed there were a lot of differences in it, such as the instance where the vanishing glass takes place. I couldn't help notice that this was a different breed of snake, because I remembered it being a boa constrictor from Brazil, but in the instance of the snake being from Burma, it was very unusual for me. That was when I was starting to make comparisons between books and films, such as the instance with Fight Club when I got into that. So, replacing the boa with the python, it kind of threw me for a loop, so to speak, because a question of what was left in, what was put out, and what was changed. And it even got me confused a little bit, because there was more to the introduction than what I remembered. Like, especially the cloaked people earlier in the book, just before Harry got dropped off to the Dursleys. Just Harry smiling when Dudley's trapped in a glass. I couldn't help but chuckle at that too. It just seemed so funny, and which is right at the moment where Vernon was looking at it, was like, oh crud. Ah, but there is magic after all. Whether you believe it or not, there is going to be magic. Yeah, this is one of the first scenes of Dudley being in his smelting's uniform. Yeah, this is definitely the extended cut here. Well, I don't know, for some reason I kind of favor extended cuts or director's cuts to theatrical releases. Yep, elephant skin, woo. It could be worse, probably, like, I don't know, maybe seal blubber, or rather... Yeah. Ever since I got into the books and the movies, I was just die-hard sucked into the wizarding world. I mean, even to this day, being as an adult, I would think that most books could be good for any age, child or adult, once they get exposed into that kind of storyline. And I would think it's kind of a coming-of-age story also, given that all of the 7 books chronicle Harry transitioning from being a child to a man. So it's very relatable. Kind of being sort of an outcast and seeing you have a rough family life and not knowing much of your own worth, given there's people that just look down on individuality. All those owls. Letters in the eggshells. Oh my goodness. You can never stop. They just can't never stop. Yeah, Chris Columbus. I mean, I was quite surprised he actually directed this at all. I mostly knew him from having seen the Home Alone films. And with that, it even fit the whimsy and even some of the comic humor. Yes, but not with Owl Post. Owl Post always keeps coming whether you want to or not. All those owls. Wah wah wah. There they come. Feels like being trapped in a wind tunnel and you're trying to grab a prize. And I would think at around this time Harry would already have Dudley's second room, even when he's trying to hide into the downstairs cupboard. Yep. Vernon's gone bat guano. Happy birthday, Harry. Who could it be now? Robbie Coltrane. But, yeah, Coltrane. I wasn't quite familiar with his work until, like, probably later in my life. Like in one instance, I knew that he, of course, played as, I know he played with Johnny Depp in From Hell. And from there, I didn't see him in much of anything. I probably have to see what else he played in for films. Maybe get a deeper grasp on what he had done for his career. But I can tell he is an incredible actor, especially having been Hagrid for 8 films straight. I mean, he even got the character development down. Like, just the idea of a gentle giant character. And even being sort of the introductory passage into the wizarding world, despite not being the usual sort that would introduce a young child like Harry into that kind of world. And another thing that kind of really threw me into a sort of questionless loop was the concept of, I mean, I've been familiar with the idea of wizards before, but in most of the instances involving magic, I also heard of the concept of witches and warlocks. But when I got into the Harry Potter stories, I came to accept the whole title of warlock as kind of a distinguished rank in wizarding society, as just like a practitioner of magic. So, with that said, and I accepted that there was the aspect of witches and wizards, while the idea of a warlock was pretty much, in a general sense, a sort of distinguished title. Strange and abnormal plays. I mean, even to this day, it'd be kind of great to actually have people study magic, even in terms of not having actual non-magic properties, or even having the capability of using magic. I mean, I would think that anyone could be using magic, regardless of background. Squeal! 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 Run, piggy, run! Squeal! Sorry. But deadly. Not a very likable character. But, I mean, over the years, I started to notice that there has been interesting stuff related to the wizarding world that could be done despite our limitations as being non-magical people, or muggles. No mages. I don't know if that was an Easter egg, but when they were passing that one shop just a few seconds ago, I noticed the name John Kent, and I was going like, Jonathan Kent, Superman. I don't know. It's little hints here and there. But, yeah, back to the topic of magic in the real world. I mean, anybody can do, like, simple magician tricks, but, I mean, just the idea of wizarding magic, it's just a remarkable subject. I mean, I even found out several years ago that there was even a sport called Muggle Quidditch, and just the very concept, it's very close to the actual depiction in the stories. I mean, even though it's set as more towards ground-based playing. So, the Philosopher's Stone. I tend to call that now based upon its actual title instead of Sorcerer's Stone, because obviously it's written in terms of legends of alchemy, or the factual depictions of how alchemy works. Just seeing Diagon Alley for the first time, I was in awe. I mean, even just seeing in the film, I was speechless. Gringotts. Upon seeing the goblins for the first time, I was quite surprised of how they were interpreted. I mean, just the aspect of being so different from Tolkien's interpretations of the goblins. I mean, they looked more brutish, while these ones, I mean, I like the idea of them being cunning and clever. I mean, just the idea of them being bankers. I mean, now, I wouldn't see anything as like a stereotype of them. I would just think that in terms of them being sort of a magical people, as opposed to human witches and wizards. Vern Troyer as Grip Hook. And I think that Warwick Davis voiced him too. I'm given that Troyer was an American actor. And Warwick Davis, I know quite a bit of his career, having grown up. Like, I first saw him as Wicket in Return of the Jedi, and I briefly saw him in clips of Willow with Val Kilmer. And when I saw him in these films as Professor Flitwick, I thought he fit the role pretty good in terms of not just being a very knowledgeable professor, but also very kind and caring. And I think that's what the Gerald teacher would actually kind of sort of mean to be. I mean, a teacher that is both not just as someone who encourages two students to push themselves, but also show a level of caring. Because the idea of a teacher is to be both as a leader and a mentor to the younger generation. The wand shop. To this day, I even wanted a wand, even if it means making one. John Hurt, another fine actor. I knew some of his works too, having grown up with some of them. Well, of course, one of his memorable ones is, of course, being Kane in the original Alien. And he was also John Merrick in The Elephant Man, co-starring with Anthony Hopkins. And he was even Chancellor Sutler in V for Vendetta, co-starring with Hugo Weaving and Natalie Portman. Another change that really got to my head was how few wands Harry tried out in the film. It had to have taken at least dozens until Harry came across his wand. I think it was Holly and Phoenix Feather, as it was. Dun dun dun. And that's another interesting thing about Ollivander here, him being so knowledgeable on wand lore. I mean, even with how they're connected with the wizarding world and the magical properties. Even with myself wanting to construct my own wand. But I would think that such a wand would incorporate multiple woods instead of just one. And I would think that having multiple ones would probably either increase or decrease the value based upon the wand itself. I mean, I've always been interested in customization. Like when I tried Pottermore, I was kind of stuck where it's either, I can't remember exactly, but I think it was either pear or reed. But the idea of one customization, customization. I even had looked up that there was even the idea of embedding a crystal into a wand, given that it would have sort of healing properties. Voldemort. Or Voldemort. You be the judge. Well, I remember a few years ago of how it was supposed to be pronounced, in that the name for you-know-who was supposed to be sort of sounding like in terms of French dialect. But I'm wondering what you all would probably think of how to actually call him by as opposed to his name, like you-know-who, or he who must not be named, or the Dark Lord. I mean, feel welcome to leave a comment of what your favorite calling would be. So, another thing that really... And I would think that Hogwarts was starting on September 1st. Well, the year. But it kind of seemed like time had passed, and with Harry just arriving at King's Cross, he would have actually gone with the Dursleys to there. I mean, being dropped off and then just happened to try finding platform 9 3/4. But, I mean, platform 9 3/4, there is an actual landmark. I think there's like a shop right there in the actual King's Cross station, where it has all kinds of Harry Potter memorabilia merch. But back on Harry Potter merch, even while growing up, I have been collecting bits and pieces of it. Like, I had been a collector of some of the old Harry Potter train card game cards, so a lot of what I had was at least 2 star decks worth of cards, maybe a few boosters, and sort of maybe at least a couple from the Quidditch expansion pack. And I even had a couple versions of the game too, from Philosopher Stone. Both were from the original PlayStation and the PC version. Graphic-wise, the PC version was insanely superior. The PlayStation one just kind of seemed... It looked like it was about like half done. A lot of people have been questioning the geography on where the story sets in. Well, of course, like just where some of the story takes place in England, of course. But if people want to know where Hogwarts actually was, it is located in the Highlands in Scotland. Hence the train ride to there. The every flavor beans. Those... When I first tried like some of the Harry Potter ones, I often wondered what kind of beans they were. I mean, obviously they were jelly beans, of course. But just the idea of them being different flavors, besides the sweet ones, that was just incredible. I wondered how they actually got the whole hologram of Dumbledore done for that card. But the jelly beans, oh man. I sometimes had a blast with those. I wanted to actually try the actual ones that were featured in like the theme parks, for example. Rupert Grint and Emma Watson, folks. I mean, it's surprising of how young they were when they first started out in this series. I mean, even today, Emma is a remarkable woman. She is incredible. I'm pretty sure that she was even seeing her, I think she just recently graduated from university, I think. I mean, Rupert Grint's career, it hasn't gone so well with him. I mean, he's done a little this and that, but I don't think he pretty much got off the ground after the Harry Potter series ended up halting. I think all it takes is probably getting him into a role that suits him. Seeing this for the first time in theaters, I couldn't help but just, again, speechless just from how Hogwarts was depicted. I couldn't help over the years, though, start to discover that the geography for Hogwarts itself is very different in each film. I mean, there was like no real official layout of how the grounds was put. Maggie Smith, another classic actress. When I first saw her, it was, I think she was in like the 90s interpretation of The Secret Garden. Tom Felton as Draco Malfoy. It's interesting how they set this a little later as opposed to being on the train when they first encountered each other. Oh, and I even like the layout of how the students are kind of all settled in uniforms instead of just robes and casual clothes. It makes them a lot more organized, and even coincides with the blending of the fantasy and reality. I mean, even the idea of incorporating uniforms, it also kind of matches with the British school system, with how much of their schools incorporate uniforms into their own structure. Oh, that's right. Matthew Lewis as Neville Longbottom. And of course, they condensed this because obviously they would have taken like several long minutes just to get all the students sorted in. Because it had to be at least maybe 2 or 3 dozen students under the first year line. And I would think that they would probably have at least the well-known ones. But then again, there have been some good Slytherins that have been sorted. Alan Rickman. Another classic actor. Alan Rickman, yeah. I mean, I know some of his works too, having watched a few here and there, like obviously Hans Gruber from Die Hard. And Metatron in Kevin Smith's Dogma. I just remembered he was also the caterpillar in the recent Alice in Wonderland films, and Marvin the paranoid android in the pretty mediocre Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the Galaxy Quest with Tim Allen. Oh, and Sweeney Todd with Johnny Depp. Wow, I'm seeing a lot of connections here. I mean, Coltrane and Rickman having collaborated with Depp, who is also God Grindelwald in the Fantastic Beasts films. taken from the third book. Let the feast begin. Kind of seems like the changes here and there are pretty much to condense the story, plus add little hints here and there from the later books. John Cleese, another good actor. As nearly Headless Nick, or as I prefer, Sir Nicholas. But John Cleese, yeah, I've known him some works like Great Muppet Caper, Monty Python. So many staircases just leading to the dormitories. I mean, just the idea of all those paintings moving. That's just incredible. And I'm surprised they even did the same thing for a lot of the photographs that were done too. One thing I seemed to notice was kind of like how the whole class system kind of works in the British school system. Like, it's the idea of prefects. One thing I came to notice too was just like the idea of their uniforms. Like, when they first get put in, I mean, they're just wearing, like, plain black ties and pullovers, but I would think that once they're sorted, they would have magically transformed after being sorted. Kind of like how the Japanese wizarding school would have their own cloaks magically transform. I mean, based on academic achievement. Like, they start out as Sakura or Cherry Blossom Pink, and then over time they change color based on scholarly achievement, like the highest being gold, and then white being, of course, having an indicator of having dwelled into touching the dark arts. Foreshadowing much? A map? Hmm? It looks very bright inside the potions room. From what I remembered, it was set in the dungeons. And I would think it'd be very dark and murky. Just the idea of having light in there, it didn't quite suit the mood, especially with Snape teaching the class. I wouldn't think he wasn't paying attention. He wanted to take notes because he wanted to at least excel with his studies, given the fact that he's very new to the wizarding world, given having known it for so long. I mean, just... Rickman fits the role of Snape so incredibly well. I mean, even despite of his age at the time, he just the role. Why aren't you all writing this down? Just the very intimidating demeanor. Hate is glare. Oh, Seamus. I mean, it's just the idea of Seamus mispronouncing a lot of those words and then poof. I wouldn't tell if it's I couldn't tell if I should pity the poor guy or just laugh at the goof up he did. I mean, yeah, and you would think that the investigation has been going on for months at that period. I'm glad they expanded upon the flying classes in a lot of the other media. I mean, especially the Harry Potter games and even Hogwarts Mystery. I mean, like, in instances, the flying classes not only teach how to fly and maybe perform more advanced technique, but that there was even the concept of proper care and handling of the brooms, such as polishing and trimming the bristle ends. And it's no surprise that Malfoy would get his up, given that he, of course, already had experience with a broom. I mean, and even I was surprised of how Harry got it down the first time, and how he saw it as kind of like a horse in some way. I mean, they could tell who their rider would be based upon, like, if they are perhaps afraid or lacking confidence. Oh. Quidditch. How about up a tree? A roof? Oof. Wrong answer. Here comes the unapproachable talent that he never knew. Oh. It's hard to think that McGonagall is both a house head and also the deputy headmistress for the school. And I think this is supposed to be the artifact. And even McGonagall was on the team at the time too. You can see that there was like a name badge just right off the side of James' Seeker badge. 1971. Evil kitty! Evil kitty! Mrs. Norris. You would think that cats would be so friendly and on their own terms, but I think with Mrs. Norris. The three-headed dog. I mean, when I first saw this, I first thought of Fluffy was kind of like a breed of Cerberus of some kind. Three-headed dog guardian of the underworld, as it's called. And that's kind of another thing I came to notice in like future books. I mean, just the very idea of Harry Potter being a success. A lot of book series try to tie in with the idea of fantasy mixing with reality. I mean, like the Percy Jackson books on how like demigods are supposed to be educated. I mean, or even like from what I heard, there was like I don't know what the original book series was, but there was a film that Film Brain covered called Stormbreaker, and it dives into the idea of young teenagers being connected with the British government's secret agency and put them under some kind of specialized training. The idea of Quidditch, I've always wondered what it'd be like to actually play Muggle Quidditch, because from how I am, I think it'd be better put as either a beater or keeper. Given that I seem to be very precise when it comes to catching or hitting something. I mean, like, I don't know, it's kind of had like this, I don't know, rare instance of clairvoyance, I don't know. Like, I can probably predict, at least at a moment's notice, of how things would probably come, or just like maybe slow things down in my mind to where it's kind of hard to explain, really. But then again, I got a very kind of brawny build, so I would think that would probably be an intimidation tactic for a keeper. Another book I read was Quidditch Through the Ages, which of course connects with the Wizarding World. I first came across it when I was right around when I was a freshman in high school. And then the library actually had a physical copy of Quidditch Through the Ages. And when I came across that, I came across the origins of the snitch and just how it was, of course, based upon a small animal that was hunted down over the centuries, nearly on the brink of extinction before it started to be incorporated as a mechanical object, which later progressed into the Quidditch game. And Warwick Davis as Professor Flitwick. I mean, all through the films he started to change appearance. It just seemed like over the films he gotten from being old age to being a lot younger. It's curious. I did notice that bell in the background. I think it's kind of like a warning bell of some kind. Like in some schools they would have like an alert bell for like certain times, like 15 minutes before the start of class to 5 minutes. Then you got the start of class bell. Now I can remember a level in the Philosopher's Stone games where Harry ends up trying to run away from the chasing mountain troll. I think it was the PlayStation one that had that kind of level, being chased by the mountain troll. I mean, when I first played that, I was like, oh, gotta run, no, faster, must go faster, go. I mean, at least back in those times, when EA was releasing the Harry Potter games, those games were a lot more fun. And just the idea of an open world where you could just explore the grounds and even the castle itself and uncover many secrets, and even just the idea of collecting the famous Witches and Wizards cards. It just made the whole experience a lot more fun. But I think a little earlier I was talking about good witches and wizards from Slytherin House. Well, one instance was I came across this by accident when looking up the Harry Potter wiki and, of course, Pottermore. Was, of course, Merlin being associated with Slytherin. I mean, I would think that he would be sorted into there given being a charismatic leader. And being a sort of ambitious wizard as he was, given that... I mean, just the idea of that time of Britain being so disconnected, and the only way to do it was to unite it through Arthur. And that was another thing that really got me interested, was how, like, a lot of the lore connected with the wizarding world and the real world. It just connects with a lot of things, not just alchemy, but also Arthurian legend. But yeah, there was like many different kinds of trolls that were associated with the Wizarding World, not just the mountain troll. And when I was collecting the trading cards, there was also a forest troll, and man, despite being as common as they are in the game, they looked very almost tribal. I mean, I'm given that, I don't know, they probably seem a lot more intelligent than mountain trolls, and I would think they're probably just as dangerous. This is where Hermione becomes part of the trio. While she wasn't actually a friend to them until after the instance with the troll. Little smirk. Screw Sherlock Holmes, get Harry doing the detective business, and you will get cases done in an instant. I mean, I swear. I mean, that's another interesting thing about the trio. I mean, just that while Hermione is more book smart, and while Ron is more driven towards loyalty and strategy. It's in terms of, I just think that Harry is more intuitive and has more deductive reasoning. which I think fit him quite well as being an oar in his later life. Oh, that's going to raise some confidence there. And another interesting concept was how a lot of those brooms, there's many different ones. I mean, not just like one kind that could just be bewitched at will. I mean, a lot of them could be like ones for transportation, some could be for racing, like in the instance of the Quidditch brooms. I mean, even seeing the Quidditch pitch like this, it's remarkable of how it's all set up. I mean, it's like not all of them are just set upon the ground. There's some towers here and there. Just so many students piled up in them. And game on. Ooh. And I would think that, I mean, like, or just how dirty the Slytherins are playing, there would be a lot of penalties in terms of course, roughhousing. Given, like, of course, bumping into other players. Another thing that kind of connects with the whole House Cup thing was the winnings from the points in the Quidditch games. I think that with the more points earned, it kind of accumulates towards getting the House Cup, not just getting the Quidditch Cup alone. Marcus Flint. Just, yeah, he kind of looks kind of troll-like. One thing, oh, that's right, I forgot to mention Professor Flitwick. I know, I bring him up a lot. I see him as like a model teacher, in my opinion. Encouraging and caring. But, yeah, there's like the whole idea of like half-blood wizards and witches. I don't know if anybody knows about this, but he is considered half-goblin. That is just, knocking out wood like that? Oh no. That should have been a penalty. Lost a keeper. Lost a chaser. Filch in the Southern crowd. I missed that one. I didn't notice that till just now. Holy. God. That would have been probably his house. Given that he could be such a sly character. when I first saw this, I was just the idea of watching Snape doing those silent incantations. I was kind of thinking that the whole angle was he was actually doing that, even after reading the book. Back in the game. Alright. Now the race is on. It's all a struggle just to get the snitch. Speaking of this, I was even a developer on IMView. I did that for a few years, and some of the stuff I made included some of the Quidditch equipment, notably making the beater's bat, a bludger, a quaffle, and even the snitch. So, for those that are kind of curious, my username on there is Captain, abbreviated CPT, Steve Rogers. Back then I was originally called Justice and Punishment. Capital J, capital A, capital P. Sometimes I miss developing. Well, can't do that anymore unless you have VIP pass, so... But, yeah, in terms of Quidditch, I was very surprised they even incorporated protective padding. I mean, especially given that the bludgers would be in use. I mean, especially given that it is a wandless incantation. And that's another aspect I liked about the Wizarding World stories. It's the idea that there is wandless and nonverbal magic that can be incorporated. But I think with nonverbal magic, it would pretty much depend upon the knowledge of proper wand use. I mean, like in some instances, you would actually have to have a certain kind of wand wave movement for each spell. But you would have to be very quick about it, especially if you're wanting to chant a spell without having to say the words, just to, of course, have your opponent, if you're dueling, be unsure of what to actually... Well, let me rephrase that. I mean, I would think that if you incorporate a nonverbal spell and you know the proper wand wave movements, then it's kind of likely you would at least have an upper hand and your opponent wouldn't actually figure you out. Unless if they know the proper wand movements at heart. Bad influence. Ah, yes, the signature Weasley sweaters. And that was another thing the games incorporated, given that the students didn't actually incorporate uniforms until like maybe the third game when Prisoner of Azkaban was coming out. The Weasley twins had different colored sweaters and of course each of them indicating their first initial. Like, I don't remember which one had what, but one had green, one had blue. I mean, it was when I first saw the invisibility cloak in this, I was expecting it to be like very reflective and silver, but just the idea of it just being just the idea of how it actually blended so well with the backgrounds. I mean, I was surprised of how it turned out. I mean, it's almost like it was like sort of like a camouflage to some degree. And you would think that a restricted section would actually have a better choice of locks. Another thing that really kind of got my interest was the incorporation of the cursed vaults in Hogwarts Mystery. And to think that at least one of them was located right inside of the restricted section. I mean, it's interesting how the books actually predates the just like the concept of being created. Like, well, of course, the Hogwarts Mystery takes place between 1984 and 1991. So 7 years total just before Harry ends up being introduced to the school. And with that, it's interesting to know the expanded lore of the world before Harry becomes inducted into the wizarding world and slowly starting to know about it. Meow. Meow. And I'm very surprised of like the whole function of the invisibility cloak. I mean, you would think it would probably soften footsteps too, given it's supposed to not only sort of perhaps maybe have the wearer be unable to be seen, but have like the footsteps sort of be dampened. Unless, of course, maybe the wearer has to, of course, to walk fleet-footed and silent while also wearing the cloak to avoid being detected. Alas, the Mirror of Erised. So, for those of you who may be wondering what you would see if you came across the mirror, what would you see if you looked into it? In my case, I wouldn't really quite know, because I suppose my biggest desire was sort of a lifelong companion, because I had been very lonely growing up, and I wanted to at least have a friend in my life, maybe someone close, or maybe have a long-lasting relationship. And so, in seeing Harry stand in front of the mirror, looking upon his parents, in this instance, I would think that the book was more specific, because when he looked upon the mirror, he saw at least generations of his family. I mean, especially, given the idea of like his family having a fortune, I think it came because his grandfather, Harry's grandfather, made a special hair care product because of how, like, given himself having very wild hair like Harry does. And from there, it kind of branched off to the Potters having that fortune, which explains how the galleons were all stacked up inside the Potter vault. And I was even surprised that there was even a distant family member that's here in America, and is even an early Auror for the American wizarding community, Abraham Potter. That's the big thing. It's kind of sad knowing that Harry was looking at the mirror, seeing his parents there, and it's like he's never going to see them again. I'm actually very pleased that a lot of these deleted scenes were actually incorporated into the director's cut. In a lot of ways, it still connects and flows with the plot of the book and leaves nothing missing. It kind of seems like some of the fades seem a little longer. I would think that probably because of the arrangement of how they were cut, especially for the theatrical releases for a lot of the films. Perhaps the idea of a lot of these director's cuts having the lead scenes seem kind of to... It kind of makes the adaptations a lot more pleasing. I swear, Richard Harris, he is such an incredible actor. I am considering of at least probably looking up some of his earlier works, seeing what he had done before his 2 films in the Harry Potter series, before he was, of course, replaced by Michael Gambon, who himself is also an incredible actor. That is a good point. And just the idea of dreaming and not living, it's a very scary thought, especially, I mean, just like the idea of being a spectator in life and having it pass by. You're not even really doing anything. And just the idea of the mirror of Erised and people going insane as a result of looking through it and seeing the desires that they crave. Forgot. Well, the idea of anti-cheating spells on quills, it makes a lot of sense given that the students are supposed to be learning. Oy. Except for that one spot of hair on the back of your head. Either that spot got singed or attacked by a pair of clippers. Nyark. Another book connection. I mean, so, Flamel. There was another bit of trivia that I came across. Well, I got curious of the name of Flamel, and I mean, at least in real life terms, he's even known in alchemy. Believed to have at least lived for centuries through the use of the Philosopher's Stone. But it's likely just myth because it's been declared that there had to at least be a grave that had Flamel. But it's believed, well, he was believed to be buried, but once it was dug out, there was no body, from what I remember. Or I could be wrong. It's been a while since actually figuring out this information. Is that a recent edition? Hagrid's hut, located on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Definitely an added voiceover. I mean, well, one thing that I saw two different cuts. There was of course, there was the British version from the UK, and of course you got the US version, and that they would have to at least have done two different cuts. One having the dialogue mention the stone being the Sorcerer's Stone, and the other being the Philosopher's Stone. They would have to at least incorporate at least each of those cuts into their respected releases. But I could see why a lot of the people here in the US would have trouble pronouncing Philosopher, hence the change to Sorcerer's Stone. I have to admit, when I first saw Norbert, I was like, ah, cuteness at 11. uh, just the way Norbert's cooing, like, a little hiccup and a sneeze. Don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they condensed a bit of little this and that, especially the Midnight Duel. Then, of course, there was the time progression of where Norbert was growing so large that he had to, of course, be picked up by Charlie. Right back at ya. And Harry just looking over at Malfoy. Aww, serves you right. Well, yeah, of course, Filch having shackles in his office. And not just that, but he also has like files upon files of records of different students having disciplinary actions done on them. A lot of them being records on, like, of course, expulsions and detentions. Given that, I mean, not being only a caretaker, but he was also like a sort of a record keeper of sorts. Nighty night. Sleep tight. Don't let the doxies bite. Well, you'd think there would at least be some kind of trail. But that's another thing the game's incorporated. There was the idea of a blood trail left behind by a unicorn. The same one that was slain. And then in the games, it had Harry follow the blood trail where he came across you-know-who. Fang. Well, I would think that he is. And of course, the servant stuff thing, you could definitely tell that Malfoy was from, of course, a wealthy family. But we'll get into that a little later, especially when we dive into Chamber of Secrets. Run away! Run away! And at this point, I would think that Harry would just fall over in pain because of the burning in his scar. But I kind of think that just that one moment was kind of enough to give him a warning that this was an evil that he would face. I mean, amazingly, how Firenze is depicted, it still holds up pretty good, even given the idea that himself is a CG character. Oh, and that's right. I just remembered that there was supposed to be Peeves incorporated, but he was unfortunately cut out from the final release. It's just so sad seeing the dead unicorn right then and there. But, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's like so much mixed mythology in terms of how a lot of the creatures are depicted. I mean, kind of like how, like the idea of vampires, for example. Just the idea of like the different weaknesses of like holy water and garlic, and even sunlight for that matter. And like with the idea of unicorns having seen the adaptation, the animated adaptation to The Last Unicorn, you would think that they would, of course, be immortal. I mean, it could be the case with maybe something along the lines of unicorns being immortal in the wizarding world. But I would think that they could still be killed, given that, I mean, while they don't age and they can still live through many generations, if in the right circumstances, they could still be killed. I mean, by means of course, being harmed, for that matter. I don't know if Coltrane actually was playing on the pan flute, but I think he actually did well in that rendition of Hedwig's theme. Yes, for those of you that haven't been familiar with the soundtracks, but know John Williams being as the principal composer for the first three films. But, I mean, Hedwig's theme ultimately became as the universal Harry Potter theme itself. And that was another thing that was kind of left out. Just Hagrid gifting Harry a pan flute, which would later come in use in the book. I mean, especially when trying to get Fluffy to fall asleep. Oh, excuse me. Oh. And very likely so. What do you think? You think it was supposed to be like a welcoming party they were going to arrange? Oh. I mean, ooh. Brilliant. But scary. You can't help but feel bad for Neville. I mean, always has to be the end of a punchline. Poor boy. But he'll be a much better use later. I mean, especially with the harp playing. What do you expect? It's a three-headed dog. And of course, you would have to think that it's 3 times that, given all 3 heads are snoring at once. Talk about needing to get some dental work done, or at least clean off the tongues. I mean, I was pretty scared of what would happen if the harp stopped playing while they tried to get the trapdoor open. And they'd be just pretty much... that'd be curtains for our lovable trio here. Oh. Quiet you. Yep. Yep. And here we go. Ooh. Doggy drood. Makes me think of Evil Dead. I think they probably did something like that with how the tentacles were kind of wrapping around them, and they just had like the backwards effect where they pull away the devil snare bit by bit, and then they play backwards. I mean, that's the thing about practical effects. There's just like a level of realism. Oh, that's right. Another major difference, the use of spells, like with the devil snare. Not only devil snare hates sunlight, but also fire. But there's no actual incantation to what the bluebell flames would be. But you would think that maybe the incendio spell would probably work on the devil snare. Maybe, in essence, of course, destroy it. But those of you that are kind of curious with the Lumos thing, it's a very basic spell, and it comes in multiple levels, depending upon the level of light that is depicted. Like, of course, with Lumos, it pretty much functions like an ordinary flashlight. Then you have... there's like a second level, and then Lumos Maxima. And of course, Lumos Solem is supposed to be Lumos, but depicted as having more of sunlight as opposed to just being a maximum height of light. Yeah, the keys never did attack. in instance, it kind of seems like it makes a lot of sense to have every instructor at Hogwarts to have at least set some kind of spell or enchantment to be used as an obstacle to get to the stone. Like, of course, given just the idea of Fluffy being involved, being as the first test, then the Devil's Snare, then the winged keys, and then the giant chessboard. But, of course they had to omit the potions section. You shall go nowhere. Or, better off, none shall pass. Yep. Well, castles are also called rooks for those of you that are, well, so, for those of you that are not familiar with chess, the layout is pretty simple. Obviously, white side goes first, or red, depending on what pieces you have, and then of course the black side goes next. You have the pawns that take up the first row, the small 8 pieces. Then you have the castle rooks, then you have the knights, which are the horses, the bishops, which take up close beside the king and queen pieces. Then, of course, you have the 2 aforementioned pieces, the king and the queen. Pawns go forth, not back. So the pawns, on their first turn, they can take 1 or 2 spaces. The rooks go straight, either forward or sideways, as long as they can. Take out any piece that they can. The knights, they take up 3 squares up or down, and 1 square left or right. Or, another alternative would be like 3 squares left or right, and then 1 square up or down. The bishops go diagonal. The queen follows by with going any direction she wishes, straight or diagonal, in any direction possible. And the king is of course stuck to just using 1 square per turn, in any direction. So the basic thing is to have the king be put into checkmate, or, in essence, take out as many of the pieces as possible. Depending on the strategy. The big thing is to checkmate the king, having the game end faster. At least he's not knocked out. I mean, checkmate. Now you shall pass. Yeah, makes a lot of sense to condense much of the book, as I said. I mean, it's not bad as an adaptation. I mean, even to this day, I probably had seen The Philosopher's Stone maybe more times out of all of the films together. I mean, given the fact that I had seen it in theaters at least twice, I had the DVD of it. I mean, even not having the books after all this time, I've probably heard the audiobook dozens of times. Well, he was right not to trust you. Well, he kept his watch. Understand what? Ooh. Makes sense. This is another game. In the game, there was also even the conflict to where Harry even faces off against Quirrell. And, oh, it's how disturbing of how that turned out. I'll get into that just as soon as we get into and I was very surprised of how the depiction of Voldemort was done. I mean, just the just the idea of being put on the back of Quirrell's head like that. I can see the red eyes and just holy crap. But in the very essence of the game depiction in the Philosopher's Stone, just when Harry was facing off against Quirrell, Voldemort pretty much took control over Quirrell's body and just, violently turned his head around so that way Voldemort was facing off directly against Harry. But then again, very essence of good and evil. I mean, everything is very much gray. Nothing is in black and white anymore. I mean, even the very essence of power. I mean, those can abuse power. And use it as a means of having it as a weapon as opposed to a tool. Hey Sid, don't spray it. I was just terrified at how, like, Quirrell was just being touched by Harry and then falling away like that. It's very disturbing. I mean, I would just think that just, like, the very touch of Harry was enough to at least repel back against Quirrell as opposed to just... Now when I'm thinking of it, I wonder if there's like a kill count that Harry does. I mean, even if it's like indirectly. And off he goes. Man, that must be incredible. I mean, all those different wizarding treats. But I'm just disappointed that a lot of what the Universal attractions incorporate in terms of, like, a lot of the Harry Potter candies, is that a lot of them are just pretty much artificial. Well, like, I kind of got this thing towards natural ingredients incorporated, so, I mean, I would think that if there was at least someone who attempts to try to create authentic Harry Potter treats without use of artificial preservatives or additives, I think that would be an incredible feat. I mean, given the fact that a lot of the stuff is what I think, of course, very unhealthy to anybody who has a bit of a sweet tooth. And quite honestly, even I myself am a bit of a sweet tooth in many instances. And I would think that having organic or natural wizarding treats would be an excellent example. And I think that anything like that would be, at least to a degree, be a lot more healthier. Indeed. I mean, love itself, it can be a very powerful thing. I mean, just the very idea of love. Even the very idea itself is very universal, if not, like, if, like, well, I would think that love itself, I mean, if more people understand it but from its, like, meaning, rather it's just opposed, like, the very act of it. Perhaps more people would appreciate it more, as opposed to just abusing it. Yeah, so at this point it would be the 7th consecutive year that Slytherin would have won the House Cup. Oh yeah, the depiction of the Ravenclaw crest. I mean, me myself being as a Ravenclaw, I would think that a lot of the people, at least in just the way the films depict it, it's the concept of having a raven as opposed to an eagle on the crest. And with that, I don't know, it didn't quite suit it well, because I would think that even the eagle itself depicts wisdom, given the fact that it itself is a very majestic animal. And even the symbolism of the eagle itself, I mean, there's like a certain connection with, like, not only just cleverness, but also justice, given the fact that especially here in the US, it's even depicted as like a symbol of both freedom and justice itself. And So I would think that like the whole consecutive winnings for the House Cup with Slytherin, I think would fall through for students that would probably sort themselves into Slytherin to probably keep up with the continuity, or with or assuming that they would probably lose to Slytherin, and at least win the first year if they were in other houses. So the House Cup would have been won by Slytherin 6 times in 91. The streak ended with Gryffindor winning. So, at least from alright, so let me backtrack the case. So, the end of year feast took place in 92, where the House Cup was won by Gryffindor. So end of year 91, and then 6 years back. Yeah, so they probably had at least won the cup since around at least since around 1986 at best, at least in continuity. A nice pair of ears to go with the hair. Underage sorcery. That's what's one of the biggest laws. And that's a very good line there. He finally accepts the Wizarding World as his home. And so, this, everybody, marks the end of the beginning. So for those of you who have just listened in, I will continue our marathon with the Chamber of Secrets soon after. For those of you listening in, thank you very much for having your being part of the audience, and then I will proceed with Chamber of Secrets. Y'all take care.